Good evening all, and welcome back to Silent Souls. Tonight, we journey to the final frontier itself with 10 of the most disturbing true Alaskan horror stories. These spine-chilling accounts come directly from the mouths of homesteaders, gold miners, survival instructors, and remote villagers who encountered something in America's last untamed wilderness that defied all explanation. From the jagged peaks of the Brooks Range to the shadowy fjords of the Inside Passage, each story represents a genuine brush with the unexplainable, carefully verified through multiple sources and corroborating evidence. These are not campfire tales or urban legends, but documented experiences from real people whose lives were forever changed by what they witnessed in the land of the midnight sun. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe to Silent Souls for daily true horror content that explores the darkest corners of human experience. Hit that notification bell so you never miss when we uncover the mysteries that lurk just beyond the edge of civilization. Now, let us venture into the brutal beauty of Alaska, where temperatures drop below survivable limits, and something far more terrifying than the cold. My name is Boone Carver, or Old Boone to traders. I've trapped fur in the Tanana Valley for 30 years, setting lines for marten and fox through brutal winters. Learned from my pa, mastering snares and tracking trapping's a solitary art, but one winter's catch wasn't animal. I was raised in the Tanana, a flat expanse of forest and river north of Fairbanks, where the spruce grows thick and the winters bite hard. My father was a trapper, same as his father, and he taught me the trade, how to read tracks, set snares, skin a pelt clean. By 15, I was running lines alone, learning the land's moods, the way snow falls silent before a storm, the crack of ice on the river, the rustle of a wolverine sniffing bait. At 25, I took over the family cabin, a one-room shack 40 miles from the nearest road, and made trapping my life. Marten, fox, lynx their furs paid for ammo, flour, and the whiskey I'd share with traders in spring. It's lonely work, just me and my dog, Rusty, a husky mix with eyes sharper than mine. For 30 years, I thought I knew the valley's secrets, its dangers, its rhythms. Until last December, when I trapped something that hunted me back. Winter in the Tanana is a beast 50 below, nights that last 20 hours, snow so deep it swallows your legs. I'd set my trap line in a 10-mile loop, snares and deadfalls baited with fish guts and rabbit meat, checked every 3 days. Rusty and I worked like a machine, trudging through drifts, my .308 rifle slung over my shoulder for bears or moose. The season started strong. Marten were plentiful, their pelts thick from the cold. I'd skin them at the cabin, the fire crackling, Rusty gnawing a bone by the door. The valley was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like a gift until it turned heavy, like the land was holding its breath. The first sign came on a routine check. I was a mile from the cabin, resetting a snare, when I found tracks around it. Not marten, not wolf, but something else. They were long, thin, with too many toes, like a hand pressed deep into the snow. They didn't follow a path, just circled the snare, then vanished into the trees. Rusty growled, his hackles up, refusing to go closer. I figured it was a deformed wolverine, maybe sick, but the tracks felt wrong, deliberate, like they were watching my work. That night, the bait was gone from 3 snares, the traps untouched, no sign of struggle. I rebaited them, but my gut churned. The valley didn't feel like mine anymore. The next day, the noises started. I was skinning a fox by the cabin when I heard it a cry, high and sharp, like a trapped animal, but it shifted, turning human, a voice calling, "Help, I'm caught." It came from the woods near my trapline, but Rusty didn't budge, just whined, his eyes fixed on the trees. I grabbed my rifle and went to check, thinking a hunter was hurt, but found nothing, no tracks, no blood, just those strange prints circling another snare. The bait was gone again, the trap clean. I reset it, my hands shaking and hurried back, the cry echoing behind me, now sounding like a woman, then a child, then my father, dead 15 years. For a week, it got worse. The tracks multiplied, weaving around every trap, never tripping them, just circling, closer each day. Bait vanished nightly, my stores in the cabin's cache dwindling faster than it should. I checked for rodents, for bears, but found no claw marks, no scat, just those prints, now near the cabin, stopping at the clearing's edge. Rusty stopped eating, pacing the floor, growling at shadows. At night, the cries grew louder, more voices my mother, my old trapping partner, even my sister, who I hadn't seen since she left for Anchorage. They called my name. Boone, come out. Their voices so real, I reached for the door before catching myself. I started sleeping with the rifle loaded, the door barred, a fire roaring to drown the sounds. But the cries slipped through, weaving into my dreams visions of the valley. But wrong, the trees alive, their branches reaching, the snow red with blood. I'd wake to Rusty's growls, his eyes on the window, where the prints were now pressed against the glass, like hands testing the frame. I tried to stay rational cabin fever, I told myself, or a prank, though no one lived close enough. But the voices knew things my father's nickname for me, my sister's laugh, secrets I'd buried deep. The breaking point came on a moonless night, the temperature at 45 below, the kind of cold that cracks trees. I was stoking the fire when the cries stopped, replaced by silence, thick and wrong. Rusty froze, staring at the door, his teeth bared. Then a voice, clear as if inside the cabin. Boone, it's me. It was my father, his gravelly tone perfect, down to the cough he'd had before cancer took him. I gripped the rifle, heart pounding, and peered through the window slit. A figure stood in the clearing, just beyond the firelight, tall, thin, wearing my father's old coat, his face shadowed, but his stance unmistakable. Let me in, it said, and the voice shifted my mother, my sister, then something else. A hiss that wasn't human. I shouted for it to leave, but it stepped closer, crossing the clearing's edge, where the tracks always stopped. The snow didn't crunch under its feet. It glided, its form flickering. Now my father, now a stranger, now something with no face, just eyes like pits and a mouth too wide. Rusty lunged at the door, barking, but I held him back, my hands shaking. The figure raised a hand, and the cabin shook, the logs groaning, the fire dimming. I fired through the slit, a shot deafening, but it didn't flinch, just tilted its head, curious. The voice came again, all voices now, a chorus. You caught us, Boone. Now we catch you. I don't know how long I held out, firing, shouting, Rusty snarling beside me. The figure circled the cabin, its form shifting. My sister, my partner, faces I'd forgotten, each one a knife in my chest. The cries were everywhere, inside my head, pulling memories. My father's deathbed, my sister's tears, mistakes I'd buried. I burned everything I could wood, clothes, a cedar plank I'd kept for carving, hoping the smoke would help, remembering old stories from traders about spirits fearing fire. The figure screamed, a sound that split my ears, and retreated, but the tracks stayed, tighter, a noose around the cabin. I knew I couldn't stay. The thing was learning, growing stronger, using my own mind against me. I packed light rifle, knife, food for a week, a tarp, and harnessed Rusty to a sled. The plan was to reach Fairbanks, a 3-day trek through snow and ice. At dawn, I opened the door, the air thick with that hiss, the tracks fresh, leading into the woods. Rusty pulled, his strength my only hope, but the cries followed, now a scream, shifting voices begging me to stop, to turn back. Shadows moved in the trees, not one figure but many, their faces flickering, my family, my friends, and nothing, just voids with teeth. The trek was hell. The snow shifted, Paths I'd walked for decades gone, the trees leaning closer, branches like claws. The voices were relentless, calling my name, promising warmth, forgiveness, love. Rusty kept going, his eyes wild but focused, growling at shadows that darted too close. I saw the figure again, ahead, then beside me, then behind, its form never solid, always changing. It wore my father's face most, his eyes pleading, then laughing, then empty. I fired until my ammo ran dry, the shots doing nothing but echoing in the dark. On the second day, or maybe the third, time blurred, I found a trap, one of mine, but wrong. It held something, not marten, not fox, but a mass of flesh and bone, pulsing, with eyes that stared. It spoke, my sister's voice. "You trapped me, Boone." I cut the snare, burned it, the flames weak, but enough to make the thing scream, a sound that shook the snow from the trees. The figures retreated, but the voices grew louder, a chorus of everyone I'd known, accusing, begging, hating. Rusty faltered, his strength fading, but he pulled on, his loyalty stronger than the cold. I don't know how we made it. Maybe the fire, maybe Rusty's will, maybe dumb luck. The trees thinned, the voices faded, and I saw Fairbanks lights, faint but real. I stumbled into a trading post, half dead, Rusty collapsing beside me. The traders didn't ask questions, just gave me coffee, a bed, and a vet for Rusty. The cabin was abandoned, my trapline burned, the valley left to whatever claimed it. I heard later a hunter found my snares, all tripped, all holding things that weren't animals, things he burned without touching. I trapped closer to town now, small runs, never alone. Rusty's still with me, slower but alive. The valley's changed, too quiet, too heavy, like it's waiting. I think of the figure, of the voices, of the thing I caught, still out there, wearing my father's face. The Tanana hold secrets older than my family's trade, things that hunt what hunts them. My warning, respect unmarked territories. Check your traps, earn what doesn't belong, and never follow a cry that knows your name. Some prey in the Tanana isn't caught it, catches back, and it never lets go. My name is Victor Hawley, dubbed Vic the Quick by my deckhands. I've crewed on crab boats in the Gulf of Alaska for 22 seasons, hauling pots through rogue waves and ice buildup. Started as a greenhorn, learned the ropes of baiting, stacking, and spotting hauls. Fishing here is high-stakes gambling, big payouts against deadly seas, but one haul pulled up stakes higher than any storm. I was 18 when I first stepped on a crab boat, a kid from Kodiak, escaping a dead-end town and a family that expected nothing. The Gulf of Alaska is a beast waves taller than houses, winds that strip flesh from bone, and water so cold it kills in minutes. I started as a bait boy, chopping herring and hanging it in pots, my hands raw from salt and slime. Over the years, I climbed to deck boss on the Sea Reaper, a 120-foot vessel with a crew of 8 tough men who lived for the season's bounty. We chased king crab in October, opilio in January, dodging bergs and squalls for pots that could hold 1,000 pounds of gold. The work was brutal, 20-hour shifts, frozen decks, constant risk of going overboard. But the rush hauling a full pot, legs thrashing, worth thousands kept me coming back. For 22 years, I thought I knew the Gulf's dangers. Storms, gear failures, exhaustion. Until last October, when we hauled something that wasn't crab. The season started like any other. We left Dutch Harbor under clear skies, the Sea Reaper loaded with 200 pots, bait, and fuel for a 3-week run. Captain Hale, no relation, just a coincidence that earned me my nickname, steered us to the Outer Banks, 100 miles offshore, where the crab were thick, but the seas unforgiving. The crew was solid. My best mate, Diego, a wiry Mexican with 15 seasons. Young Tim, a greenhorn full of fire. Old Lars, our engineer, who could fix anything. And 4 others, hardened by years on the water. We dropped our first string at dawn, pots sinking into the abyss, and waited, smoking cigarettes and trading stories as the boat rocked. The first hauls were decent pots half full, crab snapping at our gloves. We sorted them on deck, measuring, banding, stacking in the hold, the air thick with salt and diesel. But by day 3, the weather turned. A low-pressure system rolled in, winds gusting to 50 knots, waves crashing over the rail. We kept working, hydraulics whining as we pulled pots, but the hauls got heavier, not with crab, but something else. Diego noticed first a pot came up sagging, the frame bent like it held lead. We winched it aboard, and the smell hit us. Not the usual brine, but rot, deep and sweet, like death wound over. Inside, amid the crab, were things fused masses of flesh and shell, creatures twisted together, eyes staring from wrong places. Lars poked one with a hook, and it twitched, though it should have been dead. "What the hell?" Tim muttered, backing away. We dumped them overboard, blaming a bad patch, maybe pollution from a tanker spill. But the next pots were the same heavier, fouler, with more of those abominations. One had a fish with human-like teeth, another a crab shell, encasing something soft and pulsing. The crew was uneasy, jokes turning to whispers. Captain said press on. Quotas waited, paychecks too. That night, the nightmare started. I dreamed of depths, endless black where things slithered, calling my name. I woke sweating, despite the cold, and heard Diego muttering in his bunk, the same dream. By morning, Tim was feverish, babbling about eyes in the water. We checked the pots again, and the weight was impossible. Pots so heavy, the winch strained, gears grinding. We hauled one up, and it burst on deck, spilling not crab, but a mass of tendrils, black and slick, wrapping around Lars's leg. He screamed as it burned through his boot, skin blistering. We cut it off with axes, but Lars was changed, his eyes glassy, his voice a rasp. "It's inside," he said, clawing at his chest. The entity was alive, we realized. Not a creature, but something parasitic, infecting through touch, through breath. It spread fast. Diego got it next, a tendril splashing his face during a haul. He went quiet, then violent, smashing gear, ranting about the deep calling. We locked him below, but the nightmares worsened. Shared visions of drowned cities, ancient things stirring under the gulf. Tim jumped overboard at midnight, screaming about voices in the waves. We searched with lights, but he was gone, the sea flat as glass, mocking us. The captain quarantined the hold, but it was too late. The pots kept coming up full of it, the entity, growing, fusing crab into grotesque shapes that whispered when you got close. Lars broke free, infecting 2 more, their eyes turning black, their movements jerky. They spoke in unison, voices not theirs. "Join us." The boat felt alive, decks slick with ooze, engines stuttering like a heartbeat. I barricaded the wheelhouse with the remaining crew, but the visions came drowning depths, pulling us down. One by one, they gave in, walking to the rail, jumping into the arms of the sea. I was last, fighting the call, the whispers in my head. I cut the lines, letting the pot sink, and steered for shore, engines screaming. The entity fought, waves rising unnatural, but I made it to Dutch Harbor, alone, the Sea Reaper scarred and silent. They called it mass hysteria, bad food, but I know. The Gulf holds horrors older than ships, waiting for the unwary haul. My warning, the depths hold more than crab. Release odd hauls before they claim the boat. Some catches are alive, and they hunger for the surface. My name is Kyle Redfern, or just Red to my students. I've taught wilderness survival courses in the Chogok Mountains for 18 years, showing city folk how to build shelters, forage, and navigate without tech. I honed my skills in the military, then turned it into a business after seeing too many unprepared hikers vanish. Survival up here is about respecting nature's rules, fire starting in rain, avoiding hypothermia, spotting animal signs, but one class showed me nature sometimes breaks its own rules. I came to Alaska after 2 tours overseas. A former Army Ranger burned out on orders and bureaucracy. The Chugach, with its jagged peaks and endless forests, felt like a place I could breathe again. I started Red's Wilderness Guides out of a small office in Anchorage, teaching weekend warriors and corporate types how to survive the backcountry. My courses were practical. Build a lean-to, start a fire with wet wood, read a topo map, track game, avoid bears. I'd seen what happened to those who didn't prepare lost hikers frozen in ravines, tourists mauled for ignoring scat, entire groups vanishing without a trace. Alaska doesn't forgive mistakes, and I made sure my students knew it. For 18 years, I ran a tight ship, guiding hundreds through the wild, never losing a soul. Until last spring, when I led a group into a lesson I couldn't teach. It was early April, the tail end of winter, when the snow still blankets the Chugach, but the days stretch longer, offering just enough light to work by. I'd signed up a group of 6 for a 5-day advanced course deep backcountry, no tech, just skills and grit. The group was mixed. Sarah, a lawyer from Denver, looking to prove herself. Mark, a tech bro chasing Instagram glory. Lena, a quiet botanist studying alpine plants. Tom, a retired cop with a survivalist streak. And the twins, Ava and Ethan, college kids training for a Denali climb. They were eager, fit, and willing to learn, the kind of group I liked. We met in Anchorage, went over gear knives, tarps, fire starters, no GPS, and drove to a trailhead 60 miles east, a remote spur of the Chugach where the spruce forests give way to tundra and ice. The first day was textbook. We hiked 10 miles to a base camp at 3,000 feet, a clearing ringed by pines with a creek for water. I taught them to build snow shelters, digging Quincy huts by piling snow and hollowing it out. We practiced fire starting, using birch bark and flint, and I showed them how to spot moose tracks versus bear. The group was sharp, picking up skills fast, though Mark kept sneaking photos with a hidden phone, thinking I wouldn't notice. The air was crisp, the sky clear, and the mountains loomed like silent sentinels. It felt good, like every other course I'd run. But that night, I noticed the first sign something was off. We were gathered around the fire, eating rehydrated stew, when Lena pointed out the silence. No animals, she said, her voice low. She was right. The Chugach is alive at dusk owls hooting, squirrels chattering, the distant howl of a wolf. But that night, nothing. Not a rustle, not a snap, just the crackle of our fire and the wind through the pines. I brushed it off, said it was the weather, but the group exchanged looks. Ava shivered, pulling her coat tighter, and Tom scanned the dark with his cop's eyes. I told them to rest up, that we'd need energy for tomorrow's navigation drills. But as I lay in my shelter, I couldn't shake the feeling that the silence wasn't empty. It was watching. Day 2 started normal. I led them through orienteering, teaching them to use compasses and landmarks to plot a route across a ridge. They were competent, even Mark, who ditched his phone after I caught him. But by noon, things got strange. Sarah forgot how to tie a ball knot, something I drilled them on yesterday. She laughed it off, blaming nerves, but her hands shook as she tried again. Ethan missed a basic landmark, a lone cedar we'd used as a reference, swearing it wasn't there an hour ago. I checked. The tree was gone. No stump, no roots, just flat snow. I told myself it was a mix-up, that we'd misread the map, but my gut twisted. That afternoon, we found tracks not animal, not human, but something else. They were shallow, elongated, with too many toes, weaving through the trees like a drunkard's path. Tom crouched, studying them, and muttered, "What the hell walks like that?" That night, the howls started. Not wolves, not coyotes, but something high and keening, like a voice caught between pain and rage. They came from all directions, circling the camp, never closer than 100 yards. The group huddled by the fire, faces pale, while I gripped my knife, scanning the dark. Lena whispered about Inuit stories her grandmother told, of spirits that mimicked animals to lure hunters. They take what you know, she said, make you doubt yourself. I told her to focus on the fire, but her words stuck. The howls stopped at dawn, but the silence returned heavier, like the air was holding its breath. Day 3 was when it unraveled. We were practicing snares, setting loops for rabbits, when Ava screamed. She'd wandered 20 yards to gather branches, and swore she saw Ethan standing in the trees, staring without blinking. But Ethan was right beside me, setting a snare. I didn't go anywhere, he said, confused. Ava was shaken, insisting it was him, same jacket, same face, same eyes, but wrong. We searched the area, found nothing but those strange tracks, looping back on themselves. Mark started muttering about doppelgangers, half joking, but his voice cracked. I kept them busy, drilling fire starting again, but they were slipping. Tom forgot how to bank a fire, a skill he'd mastered day 1. Lena's compass spun wildly, pointing nowhere. The group was fraying, their confidence replaced by something I'd seen in soldiers' fear that cuts deeper than cold. That night, the howls were closer, weaving through the trees, and the fire wouldn't stay lit. We'd pile on wood, but the flames kept dying, like something was starving them. The group was on edge, snapping at each other. Sarah accused Mark of stealing her knife, though it was in her pack. Ethan and Ava clung to each other, whispering about shadows moving just beyond the light. I tried to keep control, but I felt it too, a pressure in my head, like fingers sifting through my thoughts, pulling out memories of missions gone wrong, faces of men I'd lost. Then Lina screamed, pointing into the dark. It's here, she whispered. I saw it, a figure, just at the edge of the firelight, wearing Ethan's red parka, his face, but not his face, the eyes too wide, the mouth stretched in a grin that wasn't human. I grabbed my flare gun, fired into the sky, hoping to scare it off. The flare lit the forest, and for a moment, I saw it clearly, tall, thin, its limbs bending wrong, its face flickering between Ethan's and something else, something with no features, just holes where a face should be. It didn't run. It glided, vanishing into the trees. The howls erupted, louder, angrier, and the group panicked. Tom drew his pistol, shouting for everyone to stay put. Sarah was crying. Lena was chanting something in her grandmother's tongue, and the twins were frozen, staring where the thing had been. I rallied them, ordered them to pack essentials. We were breaking camp, heading back to the trailhead 3 days early. But it wasn't that simple. The trail was gone. Not snowed over, not hidden gone. The landmarks I'd memorized for 18 years, boulders, tree lines, a notch in the ridge, were missing, replaced by unfamiliar terrain. The compass spun useless, and the stars were wrong, shifted in ways that didn't match any sky I'd navigated. The howls followed, closer now, and the tracks were everywhere, circling tighter. We hiked anyway, me in the lead, Tom at the rear, the group stumbling through snow that seemed to shift under our feet. Hours passed, or maybe days' time blurred, the light never changing, a perpetual twilight that messed with our heads. Then Ava vanished. 1 minute she was behind Ethan, the next, gone, no scream, no tracks, just empty snow. Ethan broke down, screaming her name, but the forest swallowed his voice. We searched for hours, finding only those strange prints leading nowhere. Lena said it was a mimic, a thing from her grandmother's stories that stole faces to trap the living. It learns you, she said, takes what you trust and twists it. I didn't want to believe her, but I'd seen Ethan's face on that thing, smiling in a way he never would. We pressed on, Ethan half mad with grief, the rest of us jumping at shadows. Day 4, or what I think was day 4, brought the trap. We found a clearing, one we hadn't passed before, with a fire pit already burning, flames blue and cold, giving no heat. Around it were our things: Sarah's knife, Mark's phone, Tom's badge laid out like offerings. And there was Ava, standing by the fire, smiling. Ethan ran to her, but I grabbed him, because it wasn't Ava. The eyes were wrong, the smile too wide, and her voice, when she spoke, was a chorus, like a dozen voices layered over hers. "Stay," she said. "You're home." The group froze, and I saw it more figures, stepping from the trees, wearing our faces, our clothes, but moving wrong, their limbs jerking like puppets. I don't know how I knew to use fire. Maybe Lena's stories, maybe instinct. I grabbed a branch from the ground, lit it in our own fire, and thrust it at the thing wearing Ava's face. It screamed, a sound that made my ears bleed, and the others recoiled, their forms flickering, showing what they really were: tall, thin, with hollow eyes and mouths like wounds. The fire drove them back, and I shouted for the group to run. We grabbed our packs, lit more branches, and charged through the trees, the howls chasing us. The figures followed, gliding, their faces shifting: my old CO, a lost squad mate, my father, dead 20 years. They called my name, begged me to stop, but I kept moving, torch high, the group behind me. The trailhead appeared without warning, the familiar gravel lot, and my truck under a foot of snow. We piled in, the engine roaring to life, and drove, the howls fading as we hit the highway. Ethan was sobbing, Sarah was silent, Lena was praying, and Tom kept his pistol drawn, watching the rear view. Mark was gone, vanished in the chaos, his pack left behind. We reported it to the Rangers, said he got lost, but I saw the look in their eyes. They'd heard stories like ours before, tales of hikers who saw themselves in the woods and never came back. I still run my courses, because it's who I am, but I stick to known trails now, closer to civilization. The Chugach hasn't changed, still beautiful, still deadly, but I know it hides things that wear your face, that steal your skills, your trust, your mind. Lena says they're old, older than the mountains, feeding on fear and doubt, luring you into a trap where you're lost forever. I think about Ava, about Mark, about the faces in the trees, and I wonder how close we came to joining them. This is my warning to those who venture into Alaska's wilds. Trust your instincts over your eyes, your gut over what you think you know. The wilderness teaches hard lessons, but some come from things that hunt the teachers. Check your landmarks twice, keep your fire burning, and if you see someone you know standing in the trees, smiling wrong, run. Don't look back. Some things in the Chugach don't just want your life, they want who you are. My name is Elena Vasquez. My folks around here call me Ellie. I've been homesteading in the Matanuska Valley for over a decade, building my cabin from scratch and living off the grid with my dogs and my rifle. I came here after losing my corporate job in Seattle, seeking the self-reliance and peace that only Alaska's vast emptiness can provide. Homesteading isn't for the faint of heart. It's chopping firewood in blizzards, hunting for winter stores, and dealing with isolation that can stretch for months without seeing another soul. But the freedom, the raw connection to the land, kept me rooted here until one winter when the silence turned sinister. I arrived in Alaska 12 years ago, a 32-year-old city girl burned out from boardroom politics and endless traffic jams. Seattle had chewed me up and spit me out, laid off after a merger, savings dwindling, and a lease I could no longer afford. I'd always been drawn to stories of people living off the land, and when I saw an ad for a homesteading workshop in Palmer, I packed my life into a pickup truck and drove north. The Matanuska Valley, with its fertile soil and towering spruce forests, seemed like the perfect place to start over. I bought a plot of land 40 miles from the nearest town, a rugged parcel surrounded by dense woods and backed by a ridge of low mountains. It was remote, even by Alaskan standards. No neighbors within shouting distance, no cell signal. Just me, the wilderness, and a dream of self-sufficiency. Building the cabin was my first real test. I learned to fell trees, square logs, and chink walls with moss, guided by a weathered carpenter who'd homesteaded since the 70s. It took 2 years to finish a one-room cabin with a loft, a wood stove, and a root cellar. I dug a well by hand, set up solar panels for minimal power, and planted a garden that fought the short growing season. My 2 dogs, Coda and Sable, Malamute mixes with thick fur and loyal hearts, became my constant companions. I hunted moose and caribou, trapped rabbits, and preserved berries for winter. The work was brutal, but every ache in my muscles felt like a badge of independence. The valley gave me everything I needed: solitude, purpose, and a quiet so profound it felt like the world was holding its breath. For 10 years I thrived. I mastered the rhythms of the land, the way the wind shifted before a storm, the tracks of black bears in spring, the moan of ice on the river in January. I'd see the occasional hunter or trapper passing through, and every few months I'd drive to Palmer for supplies, trading pelts and dried herbs for coffee and ammo. The locals respected my grit, calling me Ellie after I hauled a moose kill 2 miles through snow to my cabin. Life was hard but honest, and I felt more alive than I ever had in the city. The wilderness wasn't just a place. It was a partner, demanding respect, but rewarding those who gave it. I thought I knew its secrets, its moods, its dangers. But last winter, I learned that some secrets are better left buried. It was mid-December, the heart of Alaska's dark season, when the days shrink to a few hours of twilight and the nights stretch into eternity. The temperature had plummeted to 25 below zero, and the valley was locked in a deep freeze, the kind that makes your breath crystallize and your eyelashes stick together. I'd prepared well. My woodpile was stacked high. The cellar was full of smoked meat and root vegetables, and my solar batteries were charged for the long nights. Coda and Sable were restless, pacing the cabin, their ears pricking at sounds I couldn't hear. I chalked it up to the wind, which howled through the valley like a living thing, rattling the windows and piling snow against the door. But as the days passed, I began to notice things that didn't add up. The first sign was the tracks. I found them one morning while checking my trap line, a half-mile loop through the woods where I set snares for rabbits and foxes. The snow was fresh, untouched by anything but my own boots, so the prints stood out starkly deep, irregular impressions that didn't match any animal I knew. They were too large for a wolf, too narrow for a bear, and the stride was uneven, almost lurching, like something dragging itself forward. The tracks circled my traps, but didn't touch them, as if whatever made them was inspecting my work. I followed them for a quarter mile until they vanished into a dense thicket of alder and spruce, where the snow was too churned to read. Coda growled low, his hackles up, and Sable refused to go closer. I told myself it was a wolverine, maybe a moose with a bad limp, but my gut told me otherwise. The tracks felt deliberate, like they were left for me to find. That night, the wind carried something new. I was stoking the wood stove, the cabin glowing with the warm flicker of firelight, when I heard a faint whisper beneath the storm's roar. It wasn't the usual creak of trees or the hiss of snow against the walls. It sounded like words, fragmented and distant, like someone calling from the other side of the valley. I cracked the door, letting in a blast of frigid air, and listened. The dogs whined, pressing against my legs, but the sound was gone, swallowed by the wind. I shut the door, heart pounding, and tried to laugh it off. Cabin fever, I thought. Months alone can play tricks on the mind. But when I checked the traps the next day, 2 were empty, not sprung, not broken, just empty. the bait gone without a trace. And the tracks were back, circling closer to the cabin. Over the next week, the signs grew harder to ignore. My food stores in the cellar started dwindling faster than they should. I kept meticulous records of every pound of meat and jar of preserves, but I was losing a week's worth of supplies every few days. No signs of mice, no claw marks, no scat, nothing to explain it. The dogs were on edge, barely eating, their eyes fixed on the door at night. Then the noises started in earnest. Every night, as the clock ticked past midnight, I'd hear it. Whispers, soft and insistent, weaving through the wind. Sometimes it was my name, Ellie, drawn out like a sigh. Other times it was phrases, "Help me, I'm cold," come outside, spoken in voices that sounded achingly familiar. My mother's voice, dead 5 years. My old boss from Seattle, who I hadn't thought of in a decade. Once I swore I heard my childhood best friend, who'd moved away when I was 10. The voices were so clear, so real, I caught myself reaching for the door before my brain screamed to stop. I started sleeping with my rifle loaded, propped against the bed. Coda and Sable took turns keeping watch, their growls waking me whenever the whispers grew too loud. I stopped checking the traps, too unnerved to venture far from the cabin. The tracks were everywhere now, a web of prints encircling my home, some so close I could see them from the window. They never crossed the clearing around the cabin, as if respecting an invisible boundary, but they were always there, fresh each morning. I tried to stay rational, to cling to the logic that had carried me through a decade of homesteading. Maybe it was a prank, I thought, though the nearest neighbor was 20 miles away. Maybe a new predator, some mutation I hadn't studied. But deep down, I knew the truth was uglier, older, something the land itself was hiding. The breaking point came on the night of the solstice, December 21st. The temperature had dropped to 40 below, the kind of cold that burns your lungs and makes metal brittle. I hadn't slept properly in days. My nerves frayed from the constant whispers and the dog's relentless pacing. I'd boarded up the windows, leaving only a small slit to peer through, and kept the fire roaring to drown out the sounds. Around 2 a.m., the whispers stopped. The silence was worse, absolute, oppressive, like the air itself had thickened. Coda and Sable froze, staring at the door, their bodies rigid. Then, a single voice cut through the quiet, clear as if someone stood right outside. "Ellie, it's cold out here. Let me in." It was my mother's voice, perfect down to the slight quiver she'd had in her final years. My heart lurched, a mix of grief and terror. I gripped the rifle, my hands shaking, and crept to the window slit. The moonlight was dim, barely piercing the snow-heavy clouds, but I saw a figure standing just beyond the clearing, where the tracks always stopped. It was tall, humanoid, but wrong. Its limbs too long, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. It wore no coat, no gloves, just a shadow of clothing that fluttered in the wind. Its face was hidden, but I felt its gaze, heavy and unyielding, oaring into the cabin. "Ellie, please," it said again, and now it sounded like my father, gone since I was a teenager. The voice shifted, cycling through people I'd known, my old boss, my friend, even my first boyfriend, who died in a car accident. Each word was a hook, tugging at memories I'd buried. The dogs were snarling now, teeth bared, but they wouldn't move toward the door. I wanted to scream, to shoot, to do anything, but my body felt frozen, pinned by the weight of that voice. Then it stepped forward, crossing the invisible line into the clearing. The snow didn't crunch under its feet. It glided, leaving no tracks. Its form shimmered, like heat rising off pavement, shifting between faces I recognized and something else, something with hollow eyes and a mouth too wide, filled with teeth that gleamed like ice. It raised a hand, not to knock but to point, and the cabin shook as if hit by a gust, the boards creaking, the fire dimming. I snapped out of my trance, raised the rifle, and fired through the window slit. The shot echoed, deafening in the silence, but the figure didn't flinch. It just stood there, head tilted, as if curious. I fired again and again, emptying the magazine. The figure vanished, swallowed by the darkness beyond the clearing. The silence returned, heavier than before, and the dogs collapsed, whimpering. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. The whispers were gone, but the tracks multiplied, weaving tighter around the cabin, a noose of footprints that never crossed the clearing. I knew it was still out there, waiting, watching, learning. Desperate, I remembered a conversation with an old trapper in Palmer, a Tlingit elder who'd shared stories over whiskey one night. He'd spoken of the land spirits, ancient things that wore faces to lure the unwary. They feed on loneliness, he'd said. They mimic what you love to draw you out. Burn cedar, carve the old symbols, and never answer their calls. I'd laughed it off then, city skepticism still clinging to me. But now his words were all I had. I found a cedar plank in my woodpile, a gift from a neighbor years ago, and burned it in the stove, filling the cabin with sharp, cleansing smoke. I carved symbols into the doorframe raven, bare, well-crude approximations of what the elder had described, meant to guard against spirits. I whispered prayers I didn't believe in, hoping intent mattered more than faith. For 3 days, the tracks didn't return. The silence felt natural again. The dogs calmed, and I dared to hope it was over. But on the 4th night, the whispers came back, louder, angrier, a chorus of voices now, not just one. They didn't beg. They demanded, pounding on the walls, the roof, the door. The cedar smoke didn't stop them this time. The symbols seemed to burn under my fingers when I touched them. Coda and Sable howled, their eyes wild, and I knew I couldn't stay. Whatever was out there wasn't just curious anymore. It was hungry. I packed what I could carry: rifle, ammo, a week's food, a knife, and a tarp for shelter. I harnessed the dogs to a sled, their strength my only chance at covering ground fast. The plan was to reach Palmer, 40 miles away, through the snow-choked valley. I waited for dawn, hoping the light would weaken whatever stalked me, but the twilight was dim, the clouds thick. As I opened the door, the air felt wrong, heavy with the scent of decay, like something long dead had stirred. The tracks were everywhere, a maze of prints leading into the woods, and the whispers followed me, weaving through the trees. The journey was a nightmare. The sled moved slowly, the dogs straining against the deep snow. The whispers grew louder, clearer, forming sentences that clawed at my sanity. "You can't leave, Ellie," they said, in my mother's voice. "You belong here, in my father's." Shadows flitted at the edge of my vision, always just out of reach, matching our pace. Coda snapped at the air, his teeth closing on nothing. Sable whimpered, her tail tucked, but they kept pulling, driven by instinct or loyalty. I don't know how long we traveled, hours, maybe days. Time blurred, the twilight unchanging, the cold numbing my thoughts. Then I saw it again, the figure, standing on a rise 100 yards ahead. It was taller now, its form less human, its limbs twisting like branches, caught in a storm. Its face was a void, but I felt its smile, a sensation that turned my blood to ice. The dogs stopped, refusing to move closer, and the whispers became a scream, a cacophony of every voice I'd ever known, telling me to stay, to join, to give in. I fired at it, the shot swallowed by the wind, and it vanished again, only to reappear closer, then closer still, gliding without sound. I don't know how I escaped. Maybe the dog's courage, maybe the elder's symbols still held some power, maybe sheer stubbornness. I cut the sled loose, lightening our load, and ran, the dogs bounding beside me. The whispers chased us, the figure flickering in and out of sight, but the trees began to thin, the ridge giving way to open ground. I saw lights in the distance, Palmer, its glow a lifeline. The whispers faded as we crossed the valley's edge, the figure retreating into the dark. When I stumbled into town, half frozen and delirious, the locals took me in, no questions asked. They saw the dogs, saw my face, and knew. I never went back to the cabin. I sold the land to a broker, refusing to set foot in the valley again. The buyer, some out-of-state dreamer, didn't believe my warnings. I heard he lasted a month before leaving, claiming the silence was too loud. I live in Anchorage now, in a small apartment with Coda and Sable, working odd jobs to get by. The city's noise is a comfort, a shield against the quiet that nearly claimed me. But some nights, when the wind howls, I hear it a whisper, faint but clear, calling my name. I share this story for Silent Souls as a warning, not just a tale. The Alaskan wilderness is a place of beauty and brutal truth, but it's also a graveyard of secrets older than the mountains. Some homesteads are built on grounds that claim their owners, hungry for the lonely, the lost. If you choose this life, heed the signs. Tracks that don't belong, voices in the wind, silences that scream. Burn cedar, carve the old symbols, and never, ever answer the calls from the dark. Some doors, once opened, don't close. And some things in the wilderness are waiting for you to let them in. My name is Harlan Brooks, known as Hard Rock to my crew. I've been prospecting in the Yukon-Klondike region for 25 years, sifting through frozen rivers and abandoned claims for that elusive strike. I started young, drawn by tales of the gold rush, and learned the trade from old-timers who knew every trick of panning and sluicing. Mining here means battling permafrost, equipment breakdowns in sub-zero tone, and the constant risk of cave-ins or flash floods. The payoff? Moments of pure elation when you hit pay dirt, but nothing prepared me for digging up something that wasn't gold. I was 19 when I first came to Alaska, a kid from Boise with big dreams and no patience for college. The Klondike gold rush had ended a century earlier, but stories of fortunes pulled from the earth still lingered, passed down by my grandfather, who'd panned these streams in the 50s. I apprenticed under a grizzled miner named Amos, who taught me how to read a riverbed, spot quartz veins, and blast through bedrock without blowing myself up. By 25, I had my own claim, a small operation in the hills near Dawson City, working with a tight crew of for my brother Caleb, my cousin Jess, and 2 hired hands, Riley and Nate. We weren't rich, but we scraped enough gold each season to keep the dream alive, living for the thrill of a glint in the pan. Our claim was a rugged patch of land, 30 miles from the nearest road, nestled in a valley where the sun barely crested the hills in winter. The terrain was brutal, frozen gravel that broke shovels, winds that cut through triple-layered coats, and slopes so steep a misstep could send you tumbling into a ravine. We lived in a canvas tent heated by a diesel stove, hauling supplies by snow machine in winter and a TV in summer. The work was relentless, digging test pits, running sluices, thawing permafrost with fires, but it was honest. Every nugget we pulled felt like a victory against the land itself. For years, we chased veins, followed rumors of untapped deposits, and laughed off the old-timers' warnings about cursed ground. Until last February, when we found a claim that changed everything. It started with a tip from an old prospector in Dawson, a half-drunk Tlingit elder named Eli, who traded stories for whiskey at the local bar. He'd heard of a forgotten claim in the Black Hills, a remote spur of the Klondike Range abandoned since the 1890s. Rich vein, he slurred, eyes glinting. But the ground don't like giving it up. Miners went in, didn't come out. I pressed him for details, but he just shook his head, muttering about eyes in the rock and blood in the dirt. Caleb and I laughed it off superstition. We figured, born of too many cold nights and bad luck. But the coordinates he gave us were specific, and the promise of an untouched vein was too tempting to ignore. We set out a week later, The 5 of us loaded with gear: picks, dynamite, a portable sluice, and enough food for a month. The Black Hills were a nightmare to reach. 50 miles of snow-choked trails and ice-slick ridges, accessible only by snowmaking. The air was bitter, 30 below, with winds that stung like needles. The valley was eerie from the start. No birds, no animal tracks, just silence broken by the crunch of our machines. The claim was marked by a crumbling shaft, half buried in snow, its timbers rotted but still standing. Nearby, we found remnants of an old camp: rusted pans, a broken pickaxe, a leather boot frozen solid. It felt like stepping into a ghost town, but the thought of gold kept us focused. We set up camp 100 yards from the shaft, pitching our tent on a flat ledge overlooking the valley. The first few days were standard digging test pits, thawing ground with fires, panning gravel from a nearby creek. The yield was promising: flecks of gold in every pan, richer than anything we'd seen in years. Caleb was ecstatic, talking about paying off debts, maybe buying a new rig. Jess sketched maps, plotting where the vein might run. Riley and Nate, both seasoned hands, worked without complaint, though I caught them glancing at the shaft, uneasy. "Feels like it's watching us," Riley said once, half joking. I brushed it off. Mining makes you jumpy long hours, cold, and the constant threat of collapse. But the signs were there, if I'd bothered to look. The first oddity was the tools. We'd wake to find picks and shovels moved overnight, not far, just enough to notice, laid out in neat rows or stacked against the shaft entrance. We blamed each other at first, but no one copped to it, and the dogs we'd brought for protection didn't bark. Then came the sounds, low rumbles from the ground like distant thunder, but too rhythmic, too deliberate. They'd start at dusk, vibrating through our boots, stopping when we tried to listen. Jess found carvings on a boulder near the creek spirals and jagged lines, worn but intentional, not like any native art we'd seen. "Prospectors didn't do this," she said, tracing the marks. "Too old." I told her it was nothing, probably erosion, but her frown stayed with me. By the 5th day, we dug a new shaft, following a quartz vein that glittered with promise. The deeper we went, the richer the samples, nuggets the size of thumbnails. Unheard of for a surface claim, but the shaft felt wrong. The air was heavy, not just stale but thick, like breathing through cloth. Our lanterns flickered, even new ones, casting shadows that moved when they shouldn't. Nate swore he saw faces in the rock fleeting, like reflections, gone when you looked straight. "This place ain't right," he said, voice low. I told him to focus, but my own skin was crawling. That night, I dreamed of hands reaching from the walls, cold and gray, pulling me into the stone. The real trouble started on day 7. We'd blasted a new section, opening a chamber no bigger than a closet, its walls slick with frost and streaked with quartz. The air inside was rancid, like rotting meat mixed with sulfur. Caleb found a bone wedged in a crack, not animal, too long and thin, almost human, but not quite. "Maybe a miner's," he said, but it didn't look old, no decay, no wear. We should have stopped then, packed up and left, but the gold was too good, and greed is a powerful blindfold. We kept digging, hauling out buckets of ore, each one heavier with promise. That's when the artifacts appeared. They weren't tools or bones, but objects' metal fragments, smooth and cold, etched with symbols like the ones on the boulder. They hummed when you held them, a low vibration that made your teeth ache. Jess, who'd studied anthropology in college, said they looked ancient, older than any Alaskan culture she knew. "These aren't Tlingit or Athabascan," she whispered. "They're wrong." Riley found a piece shaped like a hand, its fingers too many, too long. When he dropped it, it landed upright, as if placed. We bagged them, thinking they might be worth something to a museum, but none of us wanted to touch them long. That night, the rumbles turned to whispers. Not human words. Not at first, just a low hiss, like steam escaping a pipe, coming from the shaft. We sat in the tent, lanterns dim, listening as the sound formed syllables, then phrases in voices that weren't ours. "Leave," they said, over and over, sometimes in English, sometimes in a tongue none of us knew. The dogs howled, refusing to go near the shaft. I checked the perimeter, rifle in hand, but found nothing. No tracks, no signs, just the endless snow and the dark hills watching. Caleb suggested carbon monoxide, said it could cause hallucinations, but our detectors were clear. Nate wasn't buying it. "This ain't gas," he said. "It's the ground talking." By day 10, the crew was fraying. Riley stopped eating, staring at the shaft like it was calling him. Nate kept muttering about eyes in the dark, refusing to go underground. Jess was obsessed with the artifacts, sketching them obsessively, her hands shaking. Caleb and I tried to keep things together, but the whispers were constant now, day and night, weaving into our thoughts. I'd catch myself thinking about the vein, not as gold, but as something alive, pulsing, waiting. We found more bones in the chamber, dozens, stacked neatly, none fully human. Some had carvings, like the artifacts, and they hummed too, louder, angrier. The breaking point came on the 12th night. We'd blasted deeper, chasing the vein, and hit a wall that wasn't rock. It was smooth, black, like polished obsidian, but it pulsed under our lights, faint and rhythmic, like a heartbeat. The air grew so thick we could barely breathe, and the whispers became screams, echoing inside our skulls. "You took too much," they said, in voices that sounded like our own. Riley, pale and trembling, grabbed a pickaxe and swung at the wall, screaming about setting it free. The wall cracked, and a mist poured out, gray, cold, shimmering with flecks of light like dying stars. The mist didn't drift. It moved, deliberate, curling around Riley first. He froze, eyes wide, then started laughing, a sound that wasn't his. His face changed slack, then twisted, like something else was wearing it. He turned on Nate, swinging the pickaxe, and I tackled him, pinning him down. His skin was cold, not human cold, but stone cold, and his eyes were wrong, too dark, too deep, like the shaft itself. Nate was screaming, Jess was crying, and Caleb was shouting for us to get out. The mist spread, filling the chamber, and I saw things in its shapes, faces, miners from another time, their mouths open in silent screams. We dragged Riley out, but he fought like a wild animal, clawing at us, his voice not his own. "It's ours," he kept saying, over and over. We tied him up, locked him in the tent, but the mist followed, seeping through the canvas. It didn't touch us, not like it had Riley, but it changed us. Caleb started arguing with himself, muttering about debts he'd never mentioned. Jess burned her sketches, sobbing, saying the symbols were talking back. Nate refused to speak, just sat by the fire, staring into the flames. I felt it too, a pressure in my mind, like something was digging through my memories, pulling out fears I'd buried. We decided to abandon the claim. The gold wasn't worth it, not anymore. But when we went to pack the gear, the shaft was different, wider, deeper, the black wall gone, replaced by a tunnel that hadn't been there before. The mist was thicker, pulsing with those flecks of light, and the whispers were a chorus now, chanting in that strange tongue. Riley broke free, running into the shaft before we could stop him. We heard him scream, not in pain but in ecstasy, then silence. We didn't go after him. We couldn't. The mist was alive, and it wanted us next. Caleb and I rigged dynamite, enough to collapse the shaft. Jess and Nate helped, their hands shaking but determined. We set the charges, lit the fuse, and ran, the dogs bolting ahead. The explosion shook the valley, a roar that drowned out the whispers. The shaft caved in, burying the chamber, the artifacts, and whatever we'd woken. We didn't look back, just loaded the snow machines and drove, the mist fading behind us. We reached Dawson 2 days later, half-starved, frostbitten, and silent. Nate quit mining, moved south. Jess went back to college, swore off the Klondike. Caleb stayed, but he's different now, quiet, haunted, checking corners like something's watching. I still mine, because it's all I know, but I steer clear of the Black Hills. I've heard whispers since other miners, other claims, same story. Bones that don't fit, rocks that hum, mist that moves with purpose. Eli, the old prospector, wasn't surprised when I told him. Ground's got memory, he said. You took what it guarded. It don't forget. I think about Riley, about the faces in the mist, about the vein that wasn't just gold, but something older, hungrier. I think about the bones, stacked like offerings, and wonder how many miners are still down there, part of the earth now. This is my warning to those who chase gold in Alaska's wilds. Some veins run deeper than ore, tapping into places that don't belong to us. Respect the signs, carvings, whispers, eyes in the rock. Walk away from claims that feel wrong, that watch you back. The Klondike gives, but it takes two, and what it takes, it keeps forever. Some riches are better left buried, locked in the dark where they've slept for centuries. Ignore that, and you might join them. My name is Nora Evalu, called Auntie Nora in my community. I've lived in a small Inupiaq village on the Beaufort Sea coast my whole life. Over 50 years, preserving traditions like sewing sealskin boots and storytelling around the fire. Village life is communal survival sharing hunts, weathering polar nights, honoring elders, but isolation breeds secrets, and one storm brought ours to light. Our village, Kaktovik, sits on the edge of the Arctic, where the land meets the frozen sea. It's a place of extremes. 6 months of twilight, winters so cold your spit freezes before it hits the ground, summers bright enough to burn your eyes. I was born here, raised on stories of the old ways hunting bowhead whales, reading the ice, respecting the spirits that live in the wind and water. My mother taught me to sew, my father to hunt, and my grandmother to tell the tales that kept our people alive through centuries of ice. We're fewer than 300 now, a tight-knit community where every hand matters, every story carries weight. We live by the sea's rhythm, sharing seal meat, caribou, and fish, gathering in the community hall to sing and pray when the darkness feels too heavy. For 50 years, I thought I knew this place, its moods, its rules. But last winter, I learned the ice hides things even the elders fear. It began in January, during the polar night, when the sun doesn't rise and the world is a canvas of black and gray. The temperature was 35 below, the wind screaming off the Beaufort, piling snow against our homes. We were used to storms, but this one felt different, relentless, like it was trying to erase us. The power flickered, the generator struggling, and we huddled in the hall, burning driftwood to stay warm. The elders spoke in low voices, their eyes on the windows where the snow swirled like something alive. My cousin Amos, our best hunter, said the ice was shifting, cracking in ways he'd never seen. It's waking up, he muttered, and the elders nodded, their faces grim. The first sign came on the 3rd day of the storm. I was checking the community cache, a raised platform where we store meat to keep it from bears. The cache was untouched, the sealskin covers tight, but the snow around it was wrong. There were prints not polar bear, not fox, but human-like, barefoot, deep enough to show toes curling into the ice. They led from the sea, circling the cache, and back to the water where the ice was broken, as if something had climbed out. I called Amos and our elder, Mary, to see. Mary's eyes narrowed, her hands tracing an old scar on her wrist. Not human, she said, not anymore. She wouldn't explain, just told me to burn sage and stay inside. That night, the lights appeared. Not the aurora, which dances green and gold, but sharp white flickers over the ice, like sparks from a dying fire. They pulsed, moving closer, then fading, never crossing the village's edge. We watched from the hall, the kids whispering, the elders praying. Amos said they were spirits, angered by the warming sea, the oil rigs offshore, the world changing too fast. I'd heard the stories Kalupalik, the sea hag who steals children, Tornit, the giant who hunts alone, but I'd always thought they were metaphors, lessons wrapped in fear. Now, staring at those lights, I wasn't sure. By the 5th day, the storm hadn't let up, and the village was on edge. Radios crackled with static, picking up voices that weren't ours, snatches of Inupiaq, English, even Russian, pleading for help. The kids stopped playing outside, clinging to their parents. Amos and I checked the houses, making sure everyone was accounted for. That's when we found the stranger. He was at the edge of the village, slumped against a snowbank, half frozen but alive. He wore no coat, just a torn shirt and pants, his skin pale as ice, his eyes wide and unblinking. He didn't speak when we brought him in, just stared, his breath shallow but steady. We wrapped him in blankets, fed him broth, but he wouldn't eat, wouldn't move, just watched us with those eyes. Mary took one look and backed away, muttering prayers. "He's not right," she said. "Look at his hands." I did. They were too smooth, no calluses, no frostbite, despite the cold. His face was young, maybe 30, but his eyes were old, like they'd seen centuries. We asked his name, where he came from, but he only smiled, a slow, crooked thing that made my skin crawl. We locked him in the old schoolhouse, a one-room building we used for storage, until the storm passed and we could get answers. But that night, the whispers started. They came from everywhere: the walls, the ice, the wind. Not words, not at first, just a low hum, like a song you can't quite remember. The dogs howled, refusing to go near the schoolhouse. The kids said they saw shadows moving inside, though the windows were boarded. Amos and I stood guard, rifles ready, but the whispers grew louder, forming names, our families, spoken in voices we knew. My mother's voice, dead 10 years, calling me to come outside. Amos heard his brother, lost to the sea last summer. The village gathered in the hall, praying, singing, trying to drown it out, but the voices cut through, sharp and pleading. By morning, the stranger was gone. The schoolhouse door was still locked, the windows intact, but the room was empty, the blankets folded neatly. The prints were back, leading from the schoolhouse to the ice, disappearing into a crack too narrow for a man. The storm was weakening, but the lights were brighter, pulsing like a heartbeat. Mary called a meeting, her voice shaking as she told a story I'd never heard, one the elders kept secret. Long ago, she said, the sea gave birth to things that weren't human, things that wore our skins to walk among us. They were hungry, not for food, but for trust, for love, taking it until nothing was left. They come when the ice breaks, she said, when we forget the old ways. We burned sage, carved protective symbols, raven, seal, whale into every door. But it wasn't enough. That night, Amos changed. He'd been quiet all day, his eyes distant, like the stranger's. At midnight, he stood up in the hall, smiled that same crooked smile, and spoke in his brother's voice. "Come with me," he said, walking toward the ice. I grabbed him, but his skin was cold, his strength unnatural. He fought, his face flickering. Not Amos, not his brother, but something else, its eyes hollow, its mouth too wide. The elders chanted, old songs of banishment, and Amos screamed, a sound that wasn't human, collapsing as if something left him. But it didn't stop. One by one, the village turned. My niece, Lila, only 12, started singing in a voice that wasn't hers, a song from before my time. Our mechanic, Paul, attacked his own son, claiming he was a stranger. The lights grew brighter, the whispers louder, and the prince circled every house. We locked ourselves in the hall. 50 of us left, the rest gone or changed. Mary led the chants, her voice hoarse, teaching us words we'd forgotten, songs to bind the spirits. But the thing was clever. It used our fears, our grief, turning us against each other. Neighbors accused neighbors, families split, and the hall became a battlefield of distrust. The final night was the worst. The storm stopped, but the silence was heavier, like the sea itself was listening. The lights were inside now, flickering in the corners, and the whispers were screams, calling us by name, begging us to open the door. I saw my mother in the window, her face young again, smiling, her hands beckoning. Lila saw her father. Paul saw his wife, and the kids cried for parents who'd vanished. Mary was weakening, her chants faltering, and I knew we couldn't hold out. I remembered her story, the thing fed on trust, on love. So I did the only thing I could. I took the elder's drum, the one we used for ceremonies, and started a song, not of banishment, but of defiance. I sang of our people, our strength, our survival through centuries of ice and dark. The others joined, hesitant at first, then louder, their voices drowning the whispers. The lights dimmed, the shadows retreated, and the thing in Amos's body screamed, its form flickering, showing what it was, a mass of eyes and teeth, writhing in the firelight. We sang until dawn, until our throats bled, until the thing fled, its scream fading into the sea. When the sun finally rose, weak and pale, the village was quiet. The prince were gone, the lights vanished, but we'd lost 20 people, some taken, some changed, some just broken. Amos never spoke again, his eyes empty. Lila stopped singing, her childhood stolen. Mary died a week later, her heart giving out, but she smiled, saying we'd won, for now. I buried her by the sea, carving her symbols into the ice. I still live in Kaktovik, sewing boots, telling stories, but I'm different now. The village is smaller, quieter, the scars hidden but deep. We don't speak of that winter, but we watch the ice, the lights, the prince. The sea is warming, the rigs are closer, and the old things are stirring. My warning is this: listen to the elders' tales, not as stories, but as truth. The Arctic holds secrets older than our songs, things that wear our faces to steal our souls. Burn sage, carve the symbols, and never trust a voice that calls from the ice. Some spirits don't sleep, they wait, and they're hungry for what makes us human. My name is Captain Dana Reeves, just Reeves on the logs. I've operated ferries along the southeast coast for 19 years, shuttling passengers through misty channels and tides. Started as a deckhand, rose to captain knowing every reef, but one fog-bound run charted unknown waters. I grew up in Ketchikan, where the sea is life, and learned the ropes on fishing boats before joining the Alaska Marine Highway. The Inside Passage is a maze of islands and fjords, where tides shift fast and fog can blind you in minutes. I started as a deckhand at 20, hauling lines and scrubbing decks, and by 30, I was captain of the Misty Dawn, a 200-foot ferry carrying passengers and cargo between Ketchikan, Wrangell, and Juneau. My job was routine but demanding. Navigate narrow channels, dodge icebergs, keep schedules despite storms. My crew 6 strong, led by my first mate, Carla, was tight, and we knew the passage like our own skin. For 19 years, I thought I'd seen every trick the sea could throw: rogue waves, engine failures, stranded kayakers. Until last March, when a fog took us somewhere that wasn't on any chart. It was a standard run, Ketchikan to Juneau, 36 hours with stops. The Misty Dawn carried 50 passengers, locals, tourists, a few hunters plus vehicles and supplies. The forecast was rough, 40-knot winds, heavy fog, but nothing we hadn't handled. We left at dawn, the sky gray, the water like glass before the storm. Carla ran the deck, checking lifeboats and cargo, while I steered from the wheelhouse, radar pinging reefs and buoys. The passengers were calm, sipping coffee in the lounge, watching the islands slide by. By noon, the fog rolled in, thick as smoke, cutting visibility to 100 feet. I slowed to 10 knots, trusting radar and charts, but the air felt wrong heavy, not just damp but oppressive, like it carried a weight. The first sign was the radio. It crackled with static, then voices' old distress calls, faint but clear, from ships sunk decades ago. Mayday, Sea Rose, taking on water, one said, though the Sea Rose went down in 92. Carla checked the equipment, found nothing wrong, but the calls kept coming, names of wrecks, voices pleading, then silence. The passengers noticed, their chatter fading, eyes on the fogged windows. I told them it was interference, common in storms, but my hands tightened on the wheel. The radar flickered, showing blip ships where none should be, moving too fast, then gone. By dusk, the fog was a wall, the sea flat but uneasy, like it was holding its breath. The passengers grew restless, reporting odd sights, shadows in the water, faces in the fog. A hunter, Tom, swore he saw a ship, old and wooden, sailing parallel before vanishing. I checked the charts, radar, sonar, nothing. But the crew felt it too. Carla found a lifeboat unlashed, swinging free, though no one had touched it. The engine stuttered, though our mechanic, Sam, swore it was fine. I kept course, following the channel's buoys, but they were wrong-rusted, barnacle-crusted, like they'd been underwater for years. That night, the passengers changed. They were quiet, too quiet, staring at each other like strangers. Tom said his wife, Ellen, wasn't acting right. She forgot their anniversary, something she'd never do. A tourist, Maya, whispered that her friend looked off, her eyes too bright, her smile wrong. I checked on them, found Ellen in the lounge, staring at the fog, her face blank. When I spoke, she turned, and her eyes were wrong, not hers, too dark, like ink pooling. "We're here," she said, in a voice that wasn't hers, low and layered, like many speaking at once. I backed away, heart pounding, and locked the wheelhouse. The fog thickened, and the ship felt different, smaller, the corridors narrower, the lights dimmer. The passengers were shadows now, moving too smoothly, their faces flickering. Tom's wife, then a stranger, then Maya, then someone I didn't know. Carla reported crew acting strange, Sam laughing at nothing, our cook, Lena, cutting her hand and not noticing. The radio screamed, voices chanting names, mine, Carla's, passengers, in a language I didn't know. I checked the GPS, but it showed us off the chart, in open water where islands should be. The stars were gone, the fog a mirror, reflecting the misty dawn back at us, but wrong-rusted, broken, like a wreck. Then we saw it, the other ship. It emerged from the fog, a duplicate of the misty dawn, but older, decayed, its hull pitted, windows dark. Passengers stood on its deck, identical to ours, Tom, Ellen, Maya, but their faces were wrong, stretched, their eyes empty. They waved, not in greeting but in demand, their mouths moving, chanting our names. The crew panicked, Carla grabbing a flare gun, Sam praying in Portuguese. I pushed the engines to full, but the duplicate kept pace, its lights flickering, its passengers mirroring ours, step for step. The wheelhouse door rattled, though locked, and Ellen, or what was Ellen, stood outside, her face shifting. Now Maya, now a stranger, now my mother, dead 10 years. "Let us in," it said. Voices layered, and the ship shook, metal groaning. Passengers screamed below, saying their doubles were aboard, walking the halls, sitting beside them. Tom shot at one, his bullet passing through, hitting a wall. The fog was inside now, seeping through vents, cold and alive, carrying whispers. "You're us?" I saw my own face in the window, not a reflection, smiling in a way I never would. I don't know how I knew to reverse course. Instinct, maybe, or the memory of an old captain's tale about mirror waters, where the sea copies you to steal you. I spun the wheel, engines screaming, and headed back, though the charts were useless. The duplicate ship followed, its passengers calling, their voices in our heads, promising we'd stay, become them. Carla fired flares, the light cutting the fog, and the doubles screamed, their forms flickering, not human, but things with too many limbs, too many eyes. The passengers were breaking, some joined their doubles, walking into the fog, vanishing. Others fought, but their faces changed, their memories slipping, becoming strangers. I locked the wheelhouse with Carla and Sam, the last holdouts. The fog was thick, the ship a ghost, but I steered blind, trusting memory of the passage. The duplicate faded, but the whispers stayed, my mother's voice begging, then laughing. Sam broke, opening the door, joining his double on the deck, his face blank as he stepped into the fog. Carla and I held on, her hand on mine, until the fog lifted, the stars returned, and the misty dawn was alone, limping into Wrangell at dawn. We'd lost 30 passengers, gone without a trace, their doubles all that remained in photos' faces wrong, eyes empty. The crew was half gone, Carla and I, the only ones left. The Coast Guard called it a mass disappearance, blamed the storm, but their eyes said they'd seen it before. I captain no more, working docks now, the sea too close, too alive. The passage holds mirrors, places where you meet yourself and lose. My warning, fog hides more than reefs. Avoid routes where the sea reflects you, where voices know your name. If you see your own face in the mist, turn back, burn flares, and don't open the door. Some waters steal more than ships, they take who you are. My name is Dr. Theo Lang, Theo to colleagues. I've studied earthquakes in the Aleutians for 12 years, deploying sensors in volcanic zones. PhD in geophysics led me here. Analyzing tremors and fault science explains most shakes, but not the one that woke something below. I came to Alaska from Boston, trading lecture halls for the raw edge of the world. The Aleutian Islands are a geophysicist's dream, a chain of volcanic peaks strung along the Pacific Ring of Fire, where tectonic plates grind and shudder. I joined a research team in Unalaska, monitoring quakes and eruptions, setting sensors on slopes where ash falls like snow. The work was solitary but precise. Plant seismometers, record data, predict shifts. The islands are remote, 1,000 miles from Anchorage. Their village is small. Their weather brutal storms that rip roofs off, waves that swallow boats. I lived for the science, the patterns in the Earth's pulse. For 12 years, I thought I understood the Aleutians' rhythms, until last April, when the ground spoke back. It started with a new project, mapping a fault line on Umnak Island, a desolate stretch of tundra and volcanoes, home to a few Aleut villages and endless wind. Our team, me, Dr. Sarah Klein, and 2 techs, Leo and Maya, was tasked with deploying 20 seismometers along a 30-mile fault. The site was remote, accessible only by charter boat and ATV, its slopes scarred by past eruptions. Locals in Nikolsky village warned us off, their elders speaking of bad ground where the earth listens. I dismissed it as folklore, though Sarah, who'd worked with Aleut communities, urged caution. Science was my guide, data, numbers, not stories. But the island felt wrong from the moment we landed. We set up base camp near a cinder cone, a low hill of black ash under a sky heavy with clouds. The ground was cold, the air sharp with sulfur, the wind carrying a low hum like a machine idling underground. We planted the first sensors, their cables snaking through lava fields, and the readings were off tremors too regular, too shallow, like a heartbeat. Leo, our data tech, joked about ghost quakes, but Maya's face was tight, her eyes on the hills. The locals said, "Don't dig here," she whispered. I ignored her, focused on the work, but the hum grew louder, vibrating in my bones. The first night, we heard whispers, not human, not animal, but a chorus, faint and rhythmic, rising from the ground. Our radios caught it too, static laced with voices, speaking Aleut, Russian, English languages of whalers, soldiers, natives long gone. Leave, they said, over and over, though the radios were off. We checked the camp, found nothing but our own tracks. Yet the whispers followed, louder in the dark. Sarah found carvings on a boulder near camp spirals, eyes, symbols not in any textbook. These aren't Aleut, she said. They're older. I told her it was vandalism, but my hands shook as I set the next sensor. By day 3, the quakes were constant, small, rhythmic, not tectonic but alive, like something tapping below. The sensors spiked, showing patterns no fault could make, waves that formed shapes, almost words, on our screens. Leo's laptop crashed, its drive wiped, but not before showing a single image. A city, vast and dark, under the earth, its spires glowing with the same hum we heard. Maya refused to work, saying the ground was watching, her hands clutching across. I pushed on, driven by the need to understand, but the island was changing. Rocks moved overnight. Paths shifted, the cinder cone taller, its shadow longer. That night, the whispers became voices, clear and personal. My father's voice, dead from a stroke, saying, "Theo, stop digging." Sarah heard her sister, lost to cancer. Leo and Maya heard their own ghosts, their faces pale, their sleep broken by dreams of caverns, endless and alive. We found tracks around camp, not ours, but long, claw-like, circling our tents. The sensors were failing, their cables cut clean, though no one had touched them. I tried to call Unalaska, but the radio was dead, the satellite phone showing only static and those voices chanting our names. On day 5, we hit the fault. We were drilling to plant a deep sensor when the ground split a fissure, narrow but glowing, green light pulsing like a vein. The hum was a roar now, shaking our ATVs, our bones. Vapor poured out, cold and thick, smelling of iron and decay. It didn't drift but moved, curling around Maya first. She screamed, her eyes wide, then blank, her voice not hers. "Come down." Leo grabbed her, but the vapor touched him, and he froze, his skin graying, his breath short. Sarah and I pulled them back, but the vapor followed, seeping into our lungs, our minds. The visions came, cities under the earth, vast and wrong, their streets alive with things that weren't human, their eyes watching us. I saw my life, my PhD defense, my father's funeral, moments I'd forgotten played back, twisted as if something was luring me. Sarah saw her sister, not dead but changed, beckoning from the fissure. Leo and Maya were worse, Leo ranting about the deep ones, Maya chanting in a tongue none of us knew. The vapor was alive, pulling us toward the fissure, its light hypnotic, promising answers, promising everything. I don't know how I fought it. Maybe Sarah's scream, maybe the memory of the elders' warnings. I grabbed explosives from our gear meant for clearing rock and rigged them around the fissure. The vapor fought, wrapping my legs, showing me my father, my failures, but I lit the fuse. The blast shook the island, the fissure collapsing, the vapor screaming, a sound that tore my mind. We ran, dragging Leo and Maya, the ground quaking, the hum a wail. The cinder cone erupted, ash falling, but we reached the boat, its engine somehow alive, and fled, the island shrinking behind us. We made Unalaska, half dead, Maya and Leo catatonic, their eyes empty, their minds gone. Sarah quit, moved south. I stayed, but I don't sleep haunted by the visions, the city below, the voices still whispering in quiet moments. The Aleutians hold horrors older than science, things that listen through the earth. My warning, leave some faults unprobed. If the ground hums, If the whispers know you, run. Seal the cracks, burn the data, and don't look down. The Earth guards what should never wake. My name is Lydia Frost, called Lightseeker by my followers. I've chased and documented auroras across the interior for 9 years, using drones and time-lapse for exhibits. Moved from urban photography to capture the light's magic, understanding solar winds and patterns, but one display captured me instead. I grew up in Portland, where the city lights drowned out the stars, and found my calling in photography, chasing moments that made people stop and feel. But cityscapes grew stale, so at 27, I moved to Fairbanks, drawn by the aurora borealis ribbons of green, purple, and red that danced across Alaska's winter skies. I learned the science: solar winds hitting the magnetosphere, charged particles painting the night. I built a career capturing them, using drones for aerial shots and time-lapse for galleries in Anchorage and Juneau. My followers, small but loyal, called me Lightseeker, a name I wore proudly. I'd camp alone in the interior, miles from roads, waiting for the perfect display. The cold, the silence, the vastness, it was worth it for one shot that caught the sky's soul. For 9 years, I thought I knew the aurora's secrets, until last February, when the lights looked back. It was peak aurora season, the air crisp at 20 below, the forecast promising a strong geomagnetic storm. I'd scouted a spot 50 miles north of Fairbanks, a frozen lake in the Tanana Flats, far from light pollution. My setup was simple: a heated tent, 2 drones, a Canon with a wide-angle lens, and enough batteries to last 3 nights. I'd been to this lake before, flat, open, with a clear view of the northern sky. The drive was rough, my truck bouncing over snow-packed trails, but the solitude was my fuel. I set up camp at dusk, the lake a mirror of ice, the spruce forest a dark wall around it. The stars were sharp, the air still, and I felt that familiar thrill, knowing the lights were coming. The aurora started at 10 p.m., a faint green glow that swelled into waves, curling like smoke. I launched a drone, its camera catching the arcs, while my Canon clicked on a tripod. The display was strong, purples mixing with greens, but something felt off. The lights moved too fast, not flowing but darting, forming shapes, circles, spirals, almost letters that I'd never seen in 9 years. My drone's feed flickered, showing static, then a clear image of the lake, but not my lake. The trees were wrong, twisted, and the ice was cracked, glowing from below. I brought the drone down, thinking interference, but the feed cut out, and it crashed 100 yards off, its lights dead. I retrieved it, trudging through knee-deep snow, and found it intact but cold, like it had been submerged. The memory card was corrupted, showing only one frame, a blurry image of a face, not mine, staring up from the ice. I shook it off as a glitch, but my gut twisted. Back at camp, the aurora was brighter, almost blinding, and the shapes were clearer symbols, deliberate, like a code written in light. I snapped photos, but my camera's screen showed things it shouldn't. Shadows moving under the ice, figures standing at the forest's edge. I checked the lake, the trees, but saw nothing. The air was heavy, not just cold but thick, like breathing through a mask, and a low hum filled the silence, like the aurora itself was singing. That night, I stayed awake, watching the lights through my tent's mesh window. They didn't fade, didn't dim, just pulsed, the symbols sharper, almost personal. My name appeared, spelled in green arcs, Lydia, then Lightseeker, then words I didn't know, in a script that hurt to look at. I closed my eyes, but the hum grew louder, vibrating in my chest, pulling memories to the surface. My mother's death, my first love's betrayal, a childhood fear of the dark. The lights were inside my head, showing me things: my old Portland apartment, my father's funeral, places I hadn't thought of in years. I zipped the tent shut, but the light seeped through, painting the walls with scenes of my life. By morning, the aurora should have faded, but it hadn't. The sky was wrong. A perpetual twilight. The lights dim but constant. My truck wouldn't start, the battery drained despite being new. My phone was dead. Its screen cracked, though I hadn't dropped it. I tried to pack, to hike out, but the lake felt different, smaller, the forest closer, the ice creaking underfoot. I found tracks around my tent. Not animal, not human, but long, thin marks, like fingers dragged through snow. They led to the lake's center, where the ice was thin, glowing faintly, like the aurora trapped below. That's when I saw them, figures in the lights. Not shadows, not reflections, but forms, human-like, moving in the aurora's arcs. They were tall, translucent, their faces shifting. My mother, my old professor, a friend I'd lost touch with. They didn't speak, but their eyes locked on me, unblinking, their mouths opening in silent calls. I stumbled back, heart racing, and heard my name, not from the sky, but from the ice, a whisper that matched the hum. I ran to the tent, grabbed my flare gun, and fired, hoping to signal help. The flare lit the sky, but the figures didn't flinch. They moved closer, gliding through the lights, their hands reaching. I tried to reason it out: hypothermia, exhaustion, maybe carbon monoxide from my heater. But the air was clear, my mind sharp, and the figures were real. Their touch cold as they brushed my skin, draining warmth, draining me. I felt weaker, my thoughts slower, memories slipping. My first aurora shoot, my move to Fairbanks, gone like smoke. The hum was a voice now, not one but many, saying, "Stay, see, join." I fought it, packing my gear, but the forest was wrong. Trees moved, paths looped, the lake shrinking. My drones were gone. My camera showed only those faces, their eyes pleading, then demanding. On the second night, the figures stepped out of the lights. They stood on the ice, a dozen of them, wearing faces I knew, but twisted. My mother with too many eyes, my friend with a mouth like a wound. They spoke in unison, my name, their voices a chorus that shook the ground. The ice cracked, a fissure glowing green, and they reached for me, their hands passing through my coat, my skin, pulling at something deeper. I felt my life draining, years, dreams, the spark that made me Lydia. I screamed, but the sound was swallowed, the hum drowning everything. I don't know how I remembered the stories. An old Alaskan man in Fairbanks, a friend of a friend, had told me tales over coffee auroras as paths for spirits, some lost, some hungry, using the lights to escape, to feed. Never chase alone, he'd said. They need a witness to break free. I'd laughed, but now his words were all I had. I grabbed my knife, carved a circle in the ice raven. Bare, the symbols he described, crude but desperate. I burned my spare fuel, the flames weak but enough to push back the dark. The figures recoiled, their forms flickering, showing what they were: things of light and void, not human, not dead, but something else, trapped between. I ran, leaving my gear, my truck, everything but the knife and a flare. The forest fought me, branches clawing, paths twisting, but the symbols held, the fire's warmth a shield. The figures followed, their voices a scream now, not pleading but angry. The lake cracked behind me, the hum a roar, but I kept moving, guided by instinct, by the faint glow of Fairbanks lights in the distance. Hours, maybe days. Blurred time didn't work right under that sky. I stumbled into a gas station on the highway, half frozen, my gear gone, my mind frayed. The clerk called for help, and I woke in a hospital, frostbitten but alive. My truck was found untouched, but my cameras, drones, everything electronic fried. Their data gone, screens showing only static and those faces. The rangers said it was a storm, a freak aurora, but their eyes said they'd heard stories like mind chasers who saw too much, who didn't come back whole. I chase with partners now, never alone, sticking to known spots. The aurora is still beautiful, but I see it differently alive, watching, waiting. I think of those figures, of the life they took, the memories I can't reclaim. The sky holds more than light, and some doors it opens don't close. My warning, some lights seek witnesses to free them at any cost. Chase with others, keep your fire lit, and if the aurora spells your name, run, don't look up. The interior skies are vast, but they're not empty, and what dances their hungers for more than your gaze. My name is Silas Grant, known as Trailblazer Silas. I've guided hikes in Wrangell St. Elias for 14 years, leading groups through glaciers and valleys on multi-day adventures. Grew up scouting trails, know every pass and hazard like avalanches or bear territory. Guiding is about safety and wonder, but one trail led to neither. I was born in a small cabin outside McCarthy, a speck of a town at the edge of Wrangell St. Elias, Alaska's largest national park. My father was a ranger, my mother a trapper, and they taught me the land's ways, how to read snow for avalanche risks, spot bear scat, navigate by stars when clouds hid the peaks. By 16, I was scouting trails for hunters, and at 25, I started Silas's Wild Treks, guiding tourists through the park's 13 million acres of mountains, ice, and forest. My clients were thrill-seekers photographers, chasing glacier shots, climbers prepping for bigger peaks, or city folk wanting a taste of the wild. I kept them safe, taught them to respect the land, and never lost a soul. For 14 years, I thought I knew every inch of this park, every mood of its weather, every trick of its terrain. Until last summer, when I led a group down a path that wasn't on any map and wasn't in this time. It was late July, prime season, with long days and skies so clear you could see the peaks of Blackburn and Sanford shimmering 20 miles off. I'd booked a 6-day trek for a group of 5. Claire, a journalist from Seattle, writing about backcountry adventures. Raj, a tech engineer from California, testing his grit. Maria, a botanist studying alpine flora. And the couple, Ben and Sophie, Aussies on a year-long global hike. They were experienced, fit, and eager, the kind of group that made my job easy. We met at the McCarthy trailhead, loaded packs with food, tents, and bear spray, and set out for a loop through the Root Glacier and up to Donoho Peak, a challenging but safe route I'd run dozens of times. The first 2 days were perfect. We crossed the glacier, its ice glowing blue under the sun, and camped in a meadow ringed by spruce. I taught them basics, how to ford streams, check for rockfall, store food to avoid bears. Claire took notes, Raj snapped photos, Maria sketched plants, and Ben and Sophie traded jokes, their accents brightening the group. The park felt alive, ptarmigan fluttering, wind singing through the valleys, the crunch of gravel under our boots. But on day 3, as we climbed toward Donoho, I noticed the first sign something was wrong. We were following a familiar ridgeline when a fog rolled in, thick and sudden, swallowing the peaks. Wrangell St. Elias is known for quick weather shifts, but this fog was heavy, almost solid, with a chill that cut through our layers. The trail markers, cairns I'd stacked myself years ago, were gone, replaced by bare ground. I checked my map, my compass, but the needle spun, useless. Raj joked about mountain magic, but Maria's face was tight, her eyes scanning the fog. "This isn't right," she said. "The plants are wrong, look." She pointed to a patch of flowers, small and gray, unlike anything in the park's alpine zones. They smelled sharp, like rust, and wilted when she touched them. We pressed on, thinking the fog would lift, but the terrain kept changing. The ridge narrowed, the rocks sharper, the air heavier with that rust smell. By dusk, we reached a valley I didn't recognize, a bowl of black stone. No trees, just fog and silence. The group was rattled. Claire clutching her notebook, Ben and Sophie holding hands too tightly. I set up camp, built a fire, and tried to keep them calm, but the silence was oppressive, broken only by faint echoes' voices, distant, calling names. Not ours, not yet, but names that felt familiar, like half-remembered dreams. Old miners, I said, forcing a laugh. Echoes from the Kennecott days. But my father's stories of lost prospectors, swallowed by the park, gnawed at me. That night, the echoes grew clearer. We sat by the fire, tents pitched tight, when we heard a man's voice, pleading, "Help me, I'm lost." It came from the fog, maybe 100 yards off, then closer, and from another direction. Sophie whispered, "That's my dad," her voice shaking. Her father had died years ago in a car crash. Ben held her, but his face was pale, and I saw him flinch when the voice called again, this time in a woman's tone, begging, "Ben, come find me." I gripped my knife, scanning the dark, but the fog was a wall, hiding everything. The group huddled closer, Raj muttering about hallucinations, Maria praying in Spanish. I told them to stay put, that echoes play tricks in valleys, but my own heart was pounding. I'd heard stories from rangers, hikers, hearing voices, seeing things, never coming back, but I'd always chalked it up to exhaustion or cold. Day 4 was worse. The fog didn't lift, and the valley felt smaller, the walls closer, though we hadn't moved. Our gear was wrong. Claire's notebook had pages torn out, replaced with sketches of faces, not hers. Raj's compass was cracked, the needle gone. My map showed trails that didn't exist, looping back to the valley. We hiked anyway, trying to climb out, but every path led back to that black stone bowl. The echoes were constant now, a chorus of voices, men, women, children calling names, begging, screaming. "Silas," one said, clear as day, in my father's voice, dead since I was 20. I froze, my chest tight, and saw the group staring, hearing their own ghosts. Claire heard her sister, Raj his grandfather, Maria her son, lost to fever years ago. Ben and Sophie clung to each other, hearing their parents, their friends, voices from lives left behind. Then we saw the marker, a stone pillar, carved with spirals and jagged lines, like the ones old miners used, but older, wrong. It stood at the valley's center, untouched by fog, glowing faintly under the dim sky. Maria said it wasn't native, wasn't human, her voice trembling. "It's a door," she whispered, "to somewhere else." I didn't want to believe her, but the air around the stone shimmered, like heat off asphalt, and the voices came from it, louder, angrier. We circled it, looking for a way out, but the fog tightened, the voices a cacophony. That's when Claire vanished. She was behind me, and gone, no scream, no tracks, just her pack on the ground. Raj panicked, shouting her name, but the echoes mocked him, repeating it in a woman's voice, not Claire's. We searched, torches cutting through the fog, but found only more markers, smaller stones, carved with the same spirals, forming a path deeper into the valley. Against my better judgment, we followed, driven by the voices, by the hope of finding her. The path led to a cave, its mouth hidden until we were on it. The stone warm despite the cold. Inside, the air was thick, the walls pulsing with that same faint glow. The voices were deafening, chanting in a language I didn't know, pulling us deeper. The cave wasn't a cave, it was a tunnel, endless, twisting, the walls carved with scenes. Miners digging, then screaming, their bodies stretching, aging, dissolving into stone. We saw Claire, standing at a bend, but she wasn't Claire. Her face was wrong, too old, too young, her eyes empty, her mouth moving without sound. "Stay," she said, in a voice that wasn't hers, and the group froze. Behind her were others, figures in old clothes, prospectors, natives, soldiers, their faces flickering, their bodies half stone. They reached for us, and I felt time slip my hands, wrinkled, then smoothed, my breath short, then strong. Raj screamed, his hair graying, then black again. Maria fell, her skin aging decades in seconds. I don't know how I knew to destroy the marker. Instinct, maybe, or my father's voice, real or not, whispering, break it. I grabbed a rock, smashed the pillar outside the cave, and the ground shook, the voices screaming. The figures retreated. Claire's among them, her face twisting into something not human, a mouth too wide, eyes like voids. The tunnel collapsed behind us, forcing us out, the fog thinning as we ran. We stumbled through the valley, the markers crumbling, the echoes fading. By some miracle, we found the trail, the real trail, and reached the trailhead at dusk, collapsing by my truck. 4 of us left Claire gone, her pack all that remained. We reported it as a hiking accident, said she got lost in the fog, but the rangers' eyes said they knew better. They'd seen groups come back with stories like ours, trails that moved, voices that weren't there, time that broke. I still guide, because the park is my home, but I map Forbidden's routes now, places where the land lies. I think of Claire, of the figures in the cave, of the time that slipped through my fingers. The park holds doors to places not on any map, where past and present blur, where you can lose more than your way. My warning, some trails loop through time, not just terrain. Check your markers, trust your gut, and if the fog comes with voices, turn back. Smash the stones if you must, but don't follow the path that calls your name. Some doors in Wrangle's Tea. Elias don't lead home, they lead to forever.